Hey Downtimers, got some Mage Knight or HeroClix miniatures that you'd like to use but you don't need or want the combat dial bases? Don't cut the bases off just yet. You might be able to keep the stock base and just use another technique that'll work for the game you prefer. Why keep the base? Personally, I like to keep my miniatures as versatile as possible. My sons and I created a game where we used the combat dials. I don't really like them that much, but my sons like the dial bases. And if there's a chance they'll end up with my collection of miniatures, I might as well just keep the original bases on them. And there's always a chance you might sell some of your minis anyway. If you sell them to a Mage Knight or HeroClix fan, they'll be worth a lot more with the stock bases intact. Someday, one way or another, your minis are going to go to somebody else anyway. Why not give those players options so they can use them in a variety of games, even the ones they were created for? Also, maybe you don't have spare bases just yet. Save yourself the money and hassle of getting them. Why wait for bases to be shipped to you when you can use these alternative techniques right now with the supplies you most likely already have anyway? And speaking of supplies, here's what you'll need for what I call the tape technique. I like to use black electric tape as that works best for making a solid black base, and the tape adheres really well to the plastic. It's also fairly easy to cut and it takes paint pretty well too. You can just leave the tape unpainted if you just want a basic look. If you go that route, you'll find this technique is a really quick fix, especially once you get the hang of it. Although paint does a decent job of hiding the tape lines, the lines aren't that easy to see when the minis are on the table about 2 to 3 feet away, which is typically about the distance you'd expect minis to be from players when they're on the table and in play. I want to put in a couple quick reminders. Subscribe, like, and share. I don't do any marketing for this channel, and it's become a challenge for me to find the time to edit videos, but I have a lot of gaming crafts and ideas I'm constantly working on. And if I see more people are interested in what I'm doing when I get a chance to put together a video, it encourages me to get more of my crafts on the channel as well. Also, leave a comment and let me know what you think of these rebasing alternatives. So what we want to do here is grab our electrical tape and cut about 1 inch of that. And we're simply going to set that at kind of a diagonal on the front so that it covers the writing and the combat dial window. Then we're going to get a sharp X-Acto knife and we're going to trim around that so that the excess piece should come off after we make one pass through, and then we can use that excess piece on the back to cover the writing behind the figure as well. I found that if you cut about 1 inch of this electrical tape, it will work out perfectly so that you don't really have to trim that much on the back of the figure. You don't even have to trim that much at all, honestly. This was one of the first ones I've ever done, so I actually cut the first piece of electrical tape a little bit long. And so what I found is if you cut it, it's about 1 inch, maybe a little bit less than 1 inch, you don't even have to trim the back piece. And I did not speed this up so you guys could see how fast this is. This is one of the first ones I've ever done. And you'll notice I finished this inside 3 minutes. And it's ready for the table with just a basic black base. So I wanted to paint these up here because I want these guys to be cave goblins. But if you just want a regular black base, which is what I do for most of my monsters, then you simply need to do this one cut and then you trim off the front. The trim piece goes on the back, and if you trimmed it about right, you don't even have to worry about trimming on the back side, and then you're done. And I can do one of these now inside 30 seconds. Actually, I can do them, it's around 20 seconds each. So that's just how fast this is, and it's ready for the table, just like that. If you're concerned about the tape lines showing on the base, you can always add paint. I use a sponge here to apply paint, and you'll notice that it camouflages. It seems to hide the edges of the tape pretty well, even if you look fairly closely at the miniature. So if you're gaming with a miniature snob and they're very picky about their bases, you can always add some paint to these. And here in a moment, you'll see another method you could use. And of course, you could put anything on these bases, but this is probably the quickest method here, especially if you don't want to add paint. Or if you decide you do want to use paint on these miniature bases to show some background for the creature or to tie the base in with the terrain, then using this method is pretty quick and it doesn't take long for paint to dry. So even with painting the bases like this, it still takes very little time to get them on the table. Now there are all sorts of methods you can use as alternatives to rebasing these miniatures. But these are the two main methods that I use. I like the electric tape method. That tape technique really gets the miniatures converted and on the table very quickly. But if you have a little more time and you're looking to tie in the miniature with more of an outdoor scene, especially like a forestry, some sort of woodland scene and so forth, then you probably want to use what I call the scouring pad method. And this is everything you need for that particular technique. And of course, we're going to use scouring pads from the kitchen. So cut strips of that out and use your hot glue gun and simply hot glue that. I like to put the hot glue on either side of the combat dial window. You want to be sure you don't get any moisture or glue or hot glue in that window. If you do and you want to use these again, when you take the scouring pad and the hot glue and all that off, more than likely the paper that's used for that combat dial readout information is going to be ruined. So you want to make sure you get everything on either side of that window. Also, when cutting and placing the scouring pad, you want to make sure you get as close to the feet without going over them. It's really according to what you're trying to do, but typically you don't want to cover the boots or the feet of the miniature. Here I do cover just a little bit. The main idea is you want to cover the black plastic of the base, but you don't really want to cover the feet entirely. So once you get the scouring pad base settled and trimmed, then it's pretty much up to you whatever you'd like to add to that. I like to add a little bit of flock. Sometimes I'll add some Woodland Scenics flock and just kind of spot that on, and then I'll add some homemade flock as well. And I will secure that with some white glue, and then sometimes I'll add a rock, a pebble or two with some hot glue. I use flock to cover in between the scouring pad pieces, so you'll usually have a little bit of a line showing there with the black showing through. So I use flock, a pebble, or what have you, some sort of terrain piece to cover that. And if I have any other gaps in between the scouring pad, or maybe close to the feet of the miniature, between the scouring pad and the feet, I'll use flock there to cover that up as well. Now, using the scouring pad method and with the flock and the terrain pieces and pebbles and wildflowers and all, you can really get carried away, but that's part of the fun in this, I think, is just getting creative with it and just having a fun time with it. This is obviously not a quick alternative means of rebasing a miniature, but it's a lot of fun. And also keep in mind though, the more you put on, the more you need to take off later on if you do in fact end up using these miniatures again for the Mage Knight game. I really had a lot of fun with this. It was a very creative kind of thing for me. I've never played around with miniature bases like this before, so it was a great experiment, and I think it worked out pretty well. I was pretty impressed with some of the results I had. I liked some better than others, and I think my favorite so far, the tape technique. It's fun, but it's fast. So, and of course, you can do whatever you like to with these. If you have like a polar bear, you can probably get some white tape and use white paint with some styrofoam pieces, and then cover that with maybe a light blue gloss or whatever. So there's all sorts of things you can do besides getting out your X-Acto knife and your clippers or whatever and trying to hack these things off the bases. If you would, please subscribe if you haven't already. If you got anything out of this, please give us a like. We've had a lot of things going on, so it's been very difficult for me to get back to the videos, but I really appreciate you guys hanging in there with me. If you would, please leave a comment below. Let me know what you think about this. Also, please share on social media, and as always, guys, thanks for watching.